Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving straight into a really fascinating presentation by Pastor Chris Myers. We're going to explore how faith communities can glorify God, and it's all based on the ancient text of Philippians chapter 2. There are definitely some pretty complex concepts to unpack here, so let's just get right into it and discover what this is all about.
Myers actually opens up the material by drawing us in with a brilliant paradox. I want you to imagine for a second that you were offered the absolute greatest gift ever given to humanity. What would you guess it is? Well, as Myers points out, it's actually not unlimited wealth, right? Because that could just disappear overnight. It's not perfect health because, well, that naturally fades as we age. It's not even a long, successful life.
The answer, according to the source material, is the church. Now, Myers objectively acknowledges right out of the gate that this concept can be really tough for some people to digest. If you're someone who has experienced what we'd call church hurt, or if you faced abuse within a religious setting, hearing the church called God's greatest gift might sound straight up impossible. But the interesting thing is, the source text actually addresses this exact friction head on. To figure out how this all works, here's our roadmap for today, mirroring Myers' structure. We'll be covering 1. The greatest gift, 2. United in purpose, 3. Humble in serving, 4. The meaning of kenosis, and 5. The ultimate exaltation.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, the greatest gift, and get a handle on the Philippian context. You know, to truly grasp this message, we absolutely have to know the audience it was intended for. The Apostle Paul's letter was addressing a very specific internal conflict within a generally good church in the ancient city of Philippi. Myers notes that the Philippian church was dealing with massive internal divisions based heavily on socioeconomic status. So you had a mix of very wealthy people and impoverished people, and they were separating themselves into exclusive cliques. They were basically ignoring people who weren't just like them. And Myers points out that this human tendency to divide ourselves, that remains a huge challenge today, which is exactly why the ultimate goal of the text is to help the community achieve the mind of Christ.
Moving right along to section 2, United in purpose, zooming in on Philippians chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. Here, Myers breaks down how Paul builds a highly logical argument for church unity using this rapid-fire series of rhetorical ifs. If there is encouragement in Christ, if there is comfort from love, if there is participation in the Spirit, if there is affection and sympathy. The assumption is that the answer to all of these rhetorical questions is a resounding yes. And this perfectly illustrates Myers' main point. Anyone who has experienced these profound spiritual benefits should naturally be driven to respond. They should absolutely want to complete Paul's joy by being of the same mind and completely united in purpose.
So what does being of the same mind actually look like in everyday practice? Well, Myers uses a fantastic football analogy here. Picture a 300-pound lineman. He is built for pure strength and blocking. Now compare him to a 200-pound receiver who is built for agility, speed, and catching passes. They absolutely do not fulfill the same role, but they share one unified, unchangeable mission, which is the success of the team. Myers notes that just like fans bickering over a Ravens versus Steelers rivalry is incredibly trivial compared to true kingdom allegiance, different members of a church have totally distinct roles and gifts, yet they are all sharing one unified mission set by God. That brings us to section 3, humble in serving, found in Philippians 2, verses 3 and 4. Here, Myers shifts our focus away from the collective unity of the group down to individual humility.
The text is urging readers to reject empty gratification. And to explain this, Myers leans into the humor of human nature. He makes the highly relatable observation that you never, ever have to teach a 3-year-old toddler how to selfishly guard their toys, right? You definitely have to teach them please and thank you, but the word mine is just completely innate. Selfish ambition is literally our default setting as humans. To counter that default setting, the text throws down a pretty radical standard. Count others more significant than yourselves. Now, Myers is very careful to clarify this. It's not about ignoring your own interests. Looking out for yourself is completely normal and responsible. Rather, it's about actively taking that natural, innate energy you use to protect yourself and deliberately channeling it outward. It means actively choosing to view others as inherently worthy of your service and placing their needs above your own empty gratification. Okay, on to section 4, the meaning of kenosis, covering Philippians 2, verses 5 through 8. Now we're going to deconstruct a highly complex piece of Christian doctrine known as the incarnation. The critical theological term we need to pin down here is kenosis. Kenosis is simply the act of Christ emptying himself by taking the form of a servant.
Myers explicitly notes a really fascinating translation detail here. Jesus did not consider equality with God something to be grasped. Now, this doesn't mean equality with God was something he couldn't attain. It actually means it wasn't something he selfishly held onto or used for his own advantage. So, what does it actually mean that he emptied himself? Myers points out a massive theological misconception here, which is emptying by subtraction, the completely false idea that Jesus lost, paused, or gave up his divine attributes to become human. But the real theological truth presented is emptying by addition. Jesus did not cease to be God for even a fraction of a second. Rather, he emptied himself by adding the lowly, highly vulnerable nature of a human servant right alongside his divine nature. Myers briefly references the doctrine that explains this, which is called the hypostatic union. It's this profound idea that there is one single person, Jesus, who possesses two completely distinct natures. He is fully divine and eternal, and simultaneously fully human and incarnate. And these two natures coexist perfectly without any division, confusion, or change. According to the source, it is this specific, perfect coexistence that makes humanity's salvation possible in the first place. So the crucial question is, how far did this ultimate humility actually go? Myers highlights an absolutely incredible quote from academic Dr. Stephen Wellum. The limit of the kenosis of Christ, then, was not the incarnation, but the crucifixion. Think about that. Christ's humility didn't just stop at giving up the privileges of heaven to be born as a human. It went all the way to ultimate obedience, suffering the absolute lowest form of execution, death on a cross alongside common criminals. And that brings us to our final section, the ultimate exaltation, covering Philippians 2, verses 9 through 11. This is the resolution of the source text, detailing exactly how God responds to this extreme act of humility. Because of this unmatched obedience, God highly exalted him. Myers points out a really beautiful nuance here. It is Christ's human nature, the incarnate Jesus, who actually suffered, that is now highly exalted and given the name above every single name. And according to the text, acknowledging his lordship, where every knee should bow, is an eventual absolute certainty for all of humanity, no matter who they are. To bring all of this rich theology right down to our modern, everyday lives, Myers gives us a super practical summary. Look, believers are not expected to abandon their families, quit their jobs, or totally burn themselves out trying to serve in every single ministry all at once. That is not the goal here. The goal is balancing your daily life responsibilities while intentionally infusing everything you do with the mind of Christ and a core mission of service. Which leaves us with one final, really provocative question inspired by the presentation today. Are you simply managing your own interests, or are you actively humbling yourself to serve the needs of others? It's an incredible challenge that really forces us to reflect on our own innate tendencies towards selfish ambition versus stepping into a truly unified, purposeful life of service. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope this structured look at the source material brought you some genuine clarity, and I can't wait to see you on the next explainer.